Bill, I think we're live.
Here it is. The stream is live. Yeah, you're more tech savvy than I am, Sarah. But thanks for joining us on Bulwark on Sunday. I'm Bill Kristol. I'm here with Sarah Longwell, and we're going to discuss the No Kings attendance we attended yesterday and the broader net, what happened nationally and what it might signify for the future. So, Sarah, you went to No Kings?
I did, although I did not go. I'm just putting my do not disturb on. I didn't go to the one downtown,
right?
Where it was huge because I wanted the kids to be able to go, and so we were part of. I think the sort of older cohort that lined Connecticut Avenue, and it was so great. It was a lot of this was really about honking. This was like
Right.
you hold the signs and the cars that are coming in and out of DC are honking at you. But it's funny to do it and then to sort of read all the discourse about it, because one of the things is that, prior to the event, this was going to be Hamas. These were terrorists. And of course, it was just 7 million concerned citizens. And so the critiques in the wake of it are sort of like, oh, look at all these white boomers. and so to me, it is funny how they tried to amp it up like it was going to be this, all the radical left. And now they're trying to make fun of it because it is, as it was always going to be, a bunch of peaceful Americans who just wanted to come out and like, where I was, it definitely was an older crowd. I doubt that's true of absolutely everywhere. Although even if it is, I don't know. These are the people who vote, guys. These are your reliable, consistent voters. And it was so funny. I saw tons of American flags. There was a group of people next to me singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I tweeted about it because it was so in such stark contrast to the way that Mike Johnson and the Republican leaders had been trying to portray this for weeks as a hate America rally. There was nothing hateful about it. And in fact, I haven't even seen, for 7 million people to turn out in cities all over the country, unless I'm missing it, I haven't seen evidence of big confrontations, of anything violent, of anything on fire. Like this was about as peaceful as it gets, to the point where they've sort of got nothing but lame. It was old white people. Like that's it. That's what they got. I don't know. What was your experience like?
No, it was fun. I mean, it was very honestly, kind of inspiring. I've got to say, it was fun. It was joyous. There were a lot of 2 and 3 generation families there, so it was a little older, you'd expect. Other people with kids there were a lot of like people your age who were about to take the kids to a baseball game but stopped for 20 minutes. One thing I really liked about, so a couple of things, the attack on it all by Mike Johnson, the insane, they're terrorists, they're Antifa thing. The local organizer here said that signups, you didn't have to sign up obviously to go, but they asked you to get a sense of it. Signups doubled in the last week. And I said, well, what's the normal thing? He says, normally we get an additional maybe 20% in the last week. But I do think there was a reaction against this, and people who might not have bothered to come just wanted to show, no, goddamn it, we're exercising our First Amendment right, and we're defending the Constitution, and we're not going to be deterred, or we don't want our not coming to be interpreted as somehow signing on to the kind of Mike Johnson, smear. So I think it really helped actually. That's one thing I liked about ours, the big ones, for people who watched on TV or in big cities, there were stages and speeches. Ours, they went out of their way. They could have been there was a little kind of, what would you call it, gazebo, I guess, in this little park in the center of McLean, which is near the local library. About 750,000 people there, I'd say, which was about 3 or 4 times more than in June. But anyway, so it was a big crowd for us, and mostly holding the signs and honking at the intersection of 2 pretty big roads out here in Northern Virginia. But they could have arranged for speeches. I mean, it's sort of set up for that a little bit. And other events I've been to have had that. They didn't. It was entirely, a party atmosphere, not a speech atmosphere, which I thought was smart. And I asked one of the organizers, and she said that, apart from the big cities where you sort of have some member of Congress or governor, you sort of have to do the speeches, that the almost 99% of the others were more like this. And so I do think there was a real sense of participation, equality, if you want to say, among everyone. I mean, it was Barbara Comstock, the former Republican congresswoman for our district, who's never Trumper, was there, and she didn't, she mixed and mingled. We all just talked with each other, and we've lived here a long time, so we know between Susan and me, we knew a fair number of people, casually, former, someone we hadn't seen in 20 years who was in the PTA with our kids, we're in school and so forth. So it had that nice effect. The only other thing I'll say, and I'm curious whether you found this too, is in talking to people, a lot of people do with the Bulwark and watched us and read us and so forth. And they were pretty, and so we had brief discussions often. They were pretty sober. I mean, I'd say it was both a joyous atmosphere, but not a happy talk kind of everything's great. We've done this, and now it's just the whole threat goes away. I mean, there was a real sense of what happens next, do you think, Bill? And how worried are you about ICE? How worried are you about the National Guard? What do you think about what's happening with the resignation of the Admiral? I mean, I was struck by, this is a pretty political area here in Northern Virginia, and I'm not saying it would be this way everywhere, but I was struck by the sense of urgency, really, and sobriety, as well as good-naturedness of the people.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, it wasn't, you're right, that there's something to tease apart from joyous, but that also not light. Like, everybody is out there, understands the seriousness of it. And I think that the part of it that feels good to people, right, is being in community with other people who say, I see the threat as seriously as you do. And to me, the reason that I think it resonates as a bulwarky type feeling is that community piece, right? I always tell people when they talk about the Bulwark and they say, wow, your audience has gotten so big. And I say, yeah, we've got an audience, but more importantly, we've got a community, and it's stickier, and it's people who they talk to us. They also talk to each other. They follow the way that we interact. And I think that was a big piece of this. Like, these were a lot of people who were neighbors. I saw a lot of our neighbors there, but it felt like the kind of thing where I could bring our kids, and our kids could sort of see civic participation, and people, like, my kids were really into the fact that people were honking and, but at the same time, I don't know that anybody was mistaken about the severity of it. Like, what was driving people out there is a sense of, I just want to show up to show that I'm not okay with this, and be around a lot of other people who also feel like they're not okay with this. And I wanted to ask you, Bill, because I got to say, when I'm out there, it's not uncomfortable exactly. It's just, it is new. I would say, like, especially one of the reasons that you get a lot of people who are in their 60s or 70s, really, is that they'll tell you, like, we protested during Vietnam, like, we know how to protest. And I was like, I have not grown up protesting. It was not a thing you do on the right. It's not culturally, I mean, because David French used to say this, like, when do we want it? In due course,
Right.
like there's something about conservatism that never lent itself to sort of being in the streets. And also, we just didn't live. I think I had not lived through a time like this. I maybe gone to like one pride type thing back in the day, but so I haven't been in this experience a lot of protesting. But did it feel? What did it feel like? I mean, have you protested before?
No, I mean,
how many protests is this for you?
Not many. And I also have the feel, being on the right was sort of slightly, the right controlled a lot of things in the key years, Reagan and Bush, and then, second Bush. Several people there yesterday said to me, God, I haven't been in a big protest like this since the Iraq War, when I was protesting you, they said to me. I think they were mostly laughing about that, but, and I would say, if you think back to those, I remember those, the anti-Reagan nuclear protests, which were huge in the 80s, and of course, then you go back to Bill's civil rights and Vietnam. Those were, I don't say this critically at all. People were angry. I mean, those were more angry. I mean, more sense of. I mean, Vietnam, people were dying, obviously, in big numbers. Civil rights, the unbelievable injustice, and then the assault on those people. This combined, and this is maybe because it was less about a particular issue that you're asking, stop the war or pass the civil rights legislation, but more of a general statement of protest against Trump and what he's doing, and showing that he doesn't have the whole country with him. In an odd way, it was both. It was energized, and it was people were serious, as we were saying, and intense at times about it, but also they felt they could be good humored and stuff. I don't remember the good humored side of it in most protests, and I do think that was very smart, and I give the organizers a huge amount of credit, both for insisting on peaceful behavior, on training, I think 250,000 people to be these local marshals. So we had a couple of people, I mean, ours was very peaceful. There were a couple of Fairfax County policemen who were kind of hanging around chatting with people, people who were seeing neighbors. That was really the mood. But there were a couple of marshals, I guess you'd say, whatever the term would be, the people with vests, who had been through these training sessions and were there just in case. And I really give them a lot of credit for not just organizing both protests, 2,700, I think, that attracted 7 million people, but keeping them, insisting on the message being peacefulness and pro-American, and really some wonderful signs. And then embracing when the inflatables show up in Portland, and people are, the ICE is shooting, pepper bullets at them or something, saying, let's all go dressed as inflatables. I know a woman who lives near here, wasn't here in Northern Virginia, but wasn't in McLean. Someone you're a little between our ages, I guess, serious person, served in diplomacy. I mean, she ordered, I didn't know this until today, I saw her online. She had ordered like a frog suit, or maybe one of those things, unicorn or something, like 2 weeks ago. That would have been not the first person I would have thought to have done this, and had a good time going with that. Brought maybe a kid, and was going to reuse it for Halloween. That was a justification for spending the money on it, I think. But so it was unusual. I think this was really unusual. It didn't remind me, actually, I would say, of Vietnam or civil rights or Iraq in that respect. The willingness to embrace the humor while being very serious at the same time.
Yeah, and this is where I got to say, just having kids, I always have a little bit of a weird feeling about kids in these contexts. Right. Both sort of projecting one's own politics onto children, and also just safety, right? Like, what are our kids going to see here? Is it going to be safe? But because this felt as close to a neighborhood block party as I could imagine, like our biggest thing was like keeping the kids from, because the cars are coming up and down, is sort of keeping the kids off the street. But I did feel totally safe. I didn't feel, and safe, not just from people who might, because this is the other piece for all of Mike Johnson's and the Republicans' efforts to brand it as terrorists and far left radicals. I guess I thought maybe that was a call to Republicans to come out there and be in the streets, but there really was almost a like, we're going to let these guys are going to have their day, and, we're going to mock them for not watching football. But also there wasn't a lot of confrontations, and it didn't have that overhang of this could be a little dangerous. This could be kind of fraught. I felt totally fine being out there, like with families. There were a lot of families where we were.
Same here. I did see one thing online this morning. Was kind of I don't remember her name. She's a MAGA influencer type. I think her last name may be Savage, or maybe that's her, her stage name, so to speak. But she showed up at the protest, and I think it was at the No Kings. I don't even know calling it a protest, but the rally, let's say, which I think really felt more like a rally than a protest in a funny way, right?
Yeah.
Both, I guess. At the rally in, I think it was Atlanta, maybe. Wearing a MAGA, Make America Great Again hat. And I think maybe even, I don't know if she had a sign, but anyway, making clear that she was on that side. And she was clearly very disappointed from her post that everyone just basically ignored her.
Yes.
There was no one went up to her and said, how can you do this? No one was upset or annoyed. Or, get out of here. This is our protest. It was like, okay, you're an American. You can sit there with that hat. And I can't remember exactly what she posted, but it was clear that she had hoped to provoke something, and had her, her phone ready to become famous on the internet as the persecuted Trump supporter at a No Kings rally. And it didn't, and the rally goers did not rise to that bait.
Yeah, just a few other points, just randomly on some of this. One is, I said at the top, on the discourse today, it's a very like, well, they're all old and white, but that is also not true. Like, right. They are selecting. I mean, I think that is true that those people were there, and there was a good showing. where I was, which I think lent itself to that demographic, was also very diverse and filled with families. And I think that the attempt to dismiss what this was has always betrayed, and the fact that they tried to frame it up front as something really negative, hate America, shows that they are afraid that people have figured something out. And I would say it is the fact that take no bait from the MAGA types. Give them no excuses. Do not buy into any of the pretexts. Use humor, which is why I think people put a lot of effort into making signs that were, I mean, I've seen a couple people try to make a big deal out of a mean sign or two, but most of them were funny and light, not exactly lighthearted, but like they were cheeky. So that, and then the other piece of criticism I see that is an interesting one that I wanted to ask you about is this idea that the framing of No Kings, right? That idea that we call it the No Kings rally, or it's called the No Kings rally. That's absurd because Donald Trump was elected. There's nothing about him that's a king. What do you think about the framing of calling it No Kings, sort of as a communications matter?
I wasn't sure. I didn't think that much about it, honestly. You have to give it a nice shorthand slogan, and that is one. But I think it relates to the 250th anniversary of the Declaration, and there's been a lot of, and it allowed people to repeat some of the grievances in the Declaration, which do apply uncannily well to Trump, and to kind of, vaguely, I don't know what the word is, associate themselves with the spirit of the revolution and the Boston Tea Party and all that, Paul Revere's right. So I think that's fine. And I mean, yeah, it's a little literal mind. Oh, yeah, he's not a king. Well, but then, of course, Trump embraced it, didn't he, yesterday with those photos of him wearing the crown, and then that really ghastly kind of AI thing with him in the plane. So no, I think it was fine, actually. And look, in a funny way, this, you're a real communications professional. Something that's a little, what am I going to say, off-center, non-obvious, a little eccentric as a slogan is often better, right? It gets people to ask a question. Well, wait, he's not a king. Whoa, is he not a king? Look at how he's behaving. Isn't the essence of America that, as Thomas Paine said, the law is king and everyone's follows the law? And is his behavior isn't it more like a king? And so provoking that discussion, of course, he's not literally a king, but provoking that discussion in a way, I think I'm not sure they intended this, but I think ended up being good, actually, than the more standard, preserving democracy or defending the rule of law or even no tyrants. I mean, I think, which would have been felt maybe a little, No King's a little funny almost, don't you think? A little, as you said, cheeky kind of, it's, I don't know, a little historical in its resonance. I do think that was important. I think lots of people had pictures of the Constitution, the Declaration. There was that giant Constitution, I guess they paraded down Pennsylvania Avenue in DC, lots of quotations from them and from Thomas Paine and Jefferson and Madison. I think that helped very much convey the true spirit, which was, we are the patriotic Americans here. This is not like some, we decided in 2021 that this is what we believe. I mean, this is what we are, the ones in the American mainstream, and Trump is not. And I think No Kings is pretty good at conveying that.
I agree with that. There's this little part of me, the communicator inside me, that's like, well, what people are really mad about is high prices, and so shouldn't we call it we can't afford this rally? There is a part of me is like, there are more people who are mad about how much everything costs and the fact that he's not focused on that, and that's how you bring in other people. On the other hand, I was struck by how many, so the sign one of my kids made was, "Since when did we have kings?" And then he was like 1776, and then it said something like, well, apparently now, or something. But like, it was his sign. He made it up himself, and it led us to talk about. So like, he knew the date, 1776. Like it does provoke a conversation around what it is that America does. And I think that has the drawbacks in some ways of it getting a little heady and above the concerns of maybe like a big part of the coalition that's mad at Trump because he's not doing anything to make anything cheaper and whatever. On the other hand, it provokes, as people are explaining it, a sense of like, let me talk about what America's about. And so I think that there's room for other things. I think it wouldn't be crazy to have sort of like a sub thing where people are really focused on some of the economic concerns. Like the thing about the Tea Party, in part, that worked is it hit directly into people's economic anxiety about being taxed, about the national debt. I obviously, years later, know that I think it was about quite different things. But I think people should take the opportunity, I think, to just here's what I liked about it. Because I want to be clear about this. I think that what they are doing is building an ongoing infrastructure. Like the people who are like, what's the point of this? What did you guys accomplish? Well, they are starting a mass mobilization effort. And each time they are building a bigger group of people who are willing to be mass mobilized in the face of what Donald Trump is doing. That is an enormously impactful thing to do, and has a real opportunity going forward to be meaningful. And I do think that if each iteration of No Kings can think about how you widen that aperture even further to bring in people whose concerns might not be how the Supreme Court is or how Donald Trump is impacting the Constitution, but the fact that he's not lowering prices, that he's not lowering the debt, that he is working with the dictators across the world. Like, I think we can, but I just think that these have been such good first steps. They do emphasize peace. They get people out. They give people something to do, which is the number one thing we get asked. It's just sort of like, what can I do? And I think people are desperate to do something. And it feels like that going out there and being with people is something.
And I felt like, the government shutdown is basically about healthcare, and politicians do talk a lot about kitchen table issues, as they probably should. So I feel like it's a little division of labor, let the mass mobilization be No Kings and let them do that stuff. I mean, the Tea Party you mentioned, I hadn't really thought about it until you said it, but of course the Tea Party did very cleverly take a slogan like No Kings, right? I mean, it didn't call itself the anti-Obama, or we hate the bailouts. They called themselves the Tea Party to try to evoke the 1775 kind of feeling. Let me ask you about going forward, because I think it's so I said yesterday on the live stream we did that I'm not sure this is right, so I want you to tell me. I mean, that I thought the scale of it was big enough that it might break through someone said maybe JVL was sort of being, of course, a little bit of a downer, so he had to say that, well, but isn't it, we correctly said, isn't it mostly our people talking to each other, or how worried should we be about that, so to speak, anti-Trump people? And obviously to come there, you were probably already anti-Trump. So yes, in some ways it's a mobilization of 7 million people, 90% of whom already agreed with each other. And we're just, we're reassuring each other, we're showing strength, which is, believe me, not nothing, obviously, in politics. Actually, weirdly, Trump understands that, right, with his rallies, and with MAGA. MAGA actually understands this in a way better than a lot of our friendly liberal establishment types. We're like, what are they doing? That's kind of we need to focus on making writing another amicus brief or something for a court case, But I also think the scale of it is so great that people are going to know people who went to one of these rallies. That is, I mean, it's one thing to have 200,000 people in Washington or 300,000 in New York. 95% of America isn't going to know. I mean, maybe the Women's March would be the exception. Even there, how many people really knew someone who would come to Washington for that? Here, I've got to think, I certainly be true here. People may not, we know many people will ask, people will tell other people about it. People will have the sense that it was, as you say, a little bit like a potluck thing or a community gathering, or I don't know, whatever. High school graduation felt like a little bit. And I just feel like it might break through the social media bubbles a little more than a typical event. Someone said afterwards, well, next time we have to do it, everyone has to come to Washington and New York and really have 1 million people there. And I actually would have said that maybe a week ago. I now think the dispersion of it might be the best thing possible. And they did a lot. They really went out of their way to organize these in rural areas and in Trump friendly areas. I talked to someone from Culpeper. We're about 40% Trump in McLean. Culpeper is like 65%, I think, further south in Virginia. And they had a pretty big rally. And this person I was talking to said this to me, that, one thing he felt good about is that he'll go home and talk to his neighbors who, were not MAGA wild men, but I mean, voted for Trump, and sort of say, hey, we were there, and so down the street was there, and this person, from the Little League team, coaching is there. And I don't know. Am I wrong that could have a little more of an effect?
Not only do I think you're correct, and I hate disagreeing with JVL when he's not here because I like to do it when he is here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that's like classic JVL to be like, does this even matter? Let me tell you something. Anytime you get 7 million people to do anything, it matters. And it matters when that 7 million people can next time turn into 10 million people. And I think that one of the reasons this is so important is it's one of the few things that seems to reflect an understanding of the new world that we live in, which is very vibey, very who's got narrative dominance, who's the one controlling the conversation, who's sort of up and down. If you look at it one way, you can say 70 or 7 million people turned out across the country to protest Donald Trump at the same time that he got his lowest approval rating that he's ever had. He is at 37% approval, 60% disapprove. And so this is a mass mobilization effort that you are trying to just level up each time, which is why I talk about things that introducing sort of subgenres of things that people are upset about to sort of continue to widen the tent of people who are coming in to register their displeasure, because that is actually how you do communications now. It's not actually about just what it's called. It's about the ability to create an umbrella where people are localizing the conversation here. Anger at Trump. We are angry, and more people attached to it. That is better than any speech somebody could give. And honestly, I think over time, it also sends a message to a lot of the elites who have decided that Trump has a mandate or that the public is with him, to realize that not only are people not necessarily with him, they are growing increasingly angry or increasingly willing to put their bodies on the streets because they are upset about it. And I don't think there's actually anything more powerful than putting your body on the street, than showing up, especially at a time when everything's virtual. I just and I also think this is something Trump did really well. Yeah. Trump did build community. His rallies are Red Solo Cup. They have Red Solo Cup energy, right? We're all here hanging out together. There's merch and whatever. People crave community. And that is what I think Trump was giving them. And I think this is one of the first elements of people understanding this is what you have to do to sort of turn the vibes around.
I want to come back to the elites thing. Was that you and I noticed this point this week, posted almost identical, kind of, I think this was just tweets or whatever, things on Blue Sky that about the public being better than the elites, which we hadn't really talked about it recently. So it was great minds working alike. But, one point on this other point of community and people coming together, I don't know if you can do this in a focus group thing, but I'd be personally interested in this to get, I don't know, maybe, soft Trump supporters or Trump supporters who are now doubters in a focus group and ask them, do you know anyone who went to one of these things? As I think it would be interesting if, maybe no one, it's not, they might move in different circles. They're in wherever they are in Missouri, and there wasn't a big one in their town. Who knows, right? Their neighbors don't go to this kind of stuff. But I wonder if it would be interesting if a few people, maybe you shouldn't do the whole focus group on this, but as a side question, next time you have the, not obviously hard MAGA people and not honestly our people, because we'll all know people who went, I suspect. But I am curious whether I kind of have the feeling it might get beyond the normal bubbles and silos, and that's sort of what you were saying there. On the elites, if I could just, I got sort of annoyed and slightly uncharacteristically, I would say, annoyed maybe on one of these Zoom calls this week where the people were going on, how do we get the public to understand X? And what about with the public? They just don't get this. We need to really have a better messaging to the public, which is entirely false, obviously. But, it's all these people who were, in this case, big shot lawyers, but also nice people, incidentally, and fighting the good fight. And on this Zoom, because they are doing things to fight. So I don't want to be too critical. But and sort of, I said, the elites are worse than the public is actually, the public's always a bit complicated. But, Trump's been losing support. This was before yesterday, so I said they're going to turn out in big numbers, I suspect, at No Kings. The polls are, hurting Trump. Republican members of Congress who are up next year are kind of running a little bit scared. So the public is doing okay, not great. It'd be nicer if we were 32%, not 42 or whatever. But the elites is where the massive capitulation is. And we've gone from, I kind of feel like, from capitulation in some cases to collaboration. And these people have and the elites have less of an excuse, because you know what? I mean, they're, especially the real elites, presumably don't have to do this and are choosing to do this because even though they have plenty of money and plenty of status, and they wouldn't lose it all if they didn't go along, I don't think. Anyway, I guess I feel like maybe this is a bit of a wake-up call for some of our friends and colleagues, and as I say, people who are, I don't mean to be critical, who are, doing their best, fighting the good fight, but to worry a little less about persuading the public. If only I could get to these people mostly not going to get to the public anyway, right there, but do a better job of getting to their peers. I said this on this call, why don't you get your law firm to behave better? Don't worry, you're not, with all due respect, these guys are extremely intelligent lawyers. They don't know how to speak to, middle America out there. Let other people worry about that. Get your law firms to stand up a little more. I don't know. Are you as annoyed by the elites and as
I mean, annoyed doesn't begin to describe it. And I'll tell you, it is this, it's never okay to, trash the Constitution for your own benefit. But like the extent to which so many of these people were anti-Trump the first time around and then decided, well, I guess this is where the country's going, and so I'm going to jump on board. And it's like the Mark Benioffs of it. And also because they realize how transactional Trump is. Right. They also think they have this self-reverence for how slick they are by manipulating Trump, and they're getting what they can out of him. And I think that they are disgraceful. And here's one of the things I like the most about the protests. It does remind people, when you talk about hope, it reminds people that there is life after Trump. There is going to be more elections. There is going to be a future in this country. And as I watch, one of the things you talk about, things I'm enraged about right now, Donald Trump pardoning George Santos at a time after he has pardoned the January 6th, the people who attacked the Capitol, where he has put Ghislaine Maxwell in some minimum security Club Med for prisoners after she was, procuring minors for him to molest. This is a guy who is doing an enormous amount of damage, that because he's doing so much so fast, it's very difficult for us to grapple with. But the fact that people turn out in these numbers, you have to have hope to get people to keep coming out and voting, right? This is why I really dislike it when people are like, it's over, country's over, we're never going back. How do we come back from this? Like, you come back like this. This is what it looks like to figure it out. And one of the things it does is it signals to people, you might not be in charge forever. And the things that you're doing right now, you don't know that there won't be a reckoning. You think that there won't be a reckoning, but you're like, you want people to be unsure that the side they've chosen is going to be in charge forever.
No, that's such an interesting point. And I do think that points the way forward in one of the several ways forward from this. And I guess I do think, unlike some other protests which happened, this is more like civil rights in Vietnam, in the sense that those were part of an ongoing movement that ended up in big victories and real changes in power in America. And that would also be true of some of the social movements of the last 50 years, obviously. And I think that is, I have the feeling too that could be the case here. This is some of the others, the anti-Reagan nuclear protests, they had massive protests. Then Reagan went ahead with his policies. They seem to be working out fine. He didn't blow the world up. We ended up winning the Cold War. And it was like, okay, well, that was an interesting little, footnote to history. I think there's a real chance this won't just be a footnote to history. So, Sarah, thank you for taking time out on Sunday to join me on this. And this was very interesting, though. I think thinking more about the forward-looking implications of this would be interesting for all of us to do over the next few days and weeks and months.
Look forward, guys. It will make you feel better.
Well said. Sarah, thanks for joining me today. And thank you all for joining us on Bulwark on Sunday.